You're here for Season 7 of the Whole Horse Podcast, now at 110 episodes and counting. I'm your host, Alexa Linton, coming to you from Vancouver Island in Canada. I can't wait to continue to share thought-provoking, edge-pushing, geeky, and often challenging conversations with horse professionals from all areas of our industry who are working to make horses' lives better. This season, you can look forward to deep dives into equine bodywork and cranial work with my friend and colleague, Elise Miki, and much more on the specifics of creating enriching, healthy horse spaces, an area I'm particularly passionate about. I'm so excited that you're here listening in, meeting great horsey humans, and hopefully learning a new thing or two about horses and yourself. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're here on the Whole Horse Podcast, and I'm very, very excited to welcome my guest today. Michele Arana is here from South Carolina. Welcome, Michele.
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, so good. We just had this wonderful conversation before our time together, and so it makes me even more stoked to dive into what you're up to and your life with horses and all of the things that you're really passionate about right now. So I would love to start with a question just around so I found you through a Facebook post that I found really educational, informative, helpful around inclusion, diversity, equity, were some of the pieces of this post, and getting into some really supportive ways to increase the accessibility for horses, equestrian sports in our world. So I would love to ask, how did you start to come to this awareness around, horses, the horse industry? Like, what did that journey look like for you?
Well, so as a brown woman, it's something that I've always been aware of, even when I was a kid. And it was just kind of this constant lingering and sense of otherness, of loving going to the barn, loving taking lessons, I would do anything just to be around the horses, but also feeling like I was very much so by myself. And it was this busy boarding barn out in Long Island. And I just always felt like I was outcasted, and I'm a super friendly person. So it was really shitty and hurtful, and I was like, this sucks. I tried to talk to the other girls, and I felt like they'd always look down their noses at me. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just go eat lunch by myself. And as a kid, I didn't necessarily understand what that was until I was old enough to reflect on it more, and also just in general have a lot more life experience. And something I talk about in that post was, the speech that I had written up for the PATH conference that I was signed up to do. And so I really wanted to make it known that it's important to note that this isn't something that is just relevant to the horse world, and that, through these prejudices and systemic racism, it leaches into the equine community, and sometimes even more so, because the horse world is really based on tradition, and a lot of those traditions are very Eurocentric. And so as I got older, it just was always something that was in the back of my mind. And when I started my own program and, started building everything up on my own, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make my program, my barn, a place where, people of color can feel welcome, they feel comfortable, they feel included. And so, I made sure that that's every step of the way, that's a consideration.
Amazing. And that leads me into my next kind of question here is I would love to hear more about this kind of program. The question I would have is I can hear the foundation it was built on. For me, that is a foundation of caring, love, a sense of, I want everybody to partake in
the joy that is horses. I mean, I resonate with your story of like, yeah, I've been obsessed with them forever and I wanted to just be around them, right? Yeah. Yeah. So for you, can you tell us a little bit more about like your barn and what that is like? What kind of environment have you created there?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's actually super short kind of tangent side note is I'm actually going to be moving to a different facility come December 1st, and
Okay.
it's twice as big as the one I'm at now, and I have the room to continue growing and expanding. So I'm super excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the as the young people say, vibe at the barn is is very laid back. It's very understanding. I make sure that all of my clients, like regardless of where they come from, who they are, like they feel comfortable. They can feel relaxed. Like, I don't want them to feel like they can't talk to me about anything. And so a lot of times they do. Like we talk about things. It's not just you come here for your lesson and that's it, you're done. You know, I have, I mean, really, my my students are a pretty wide range of people. Like I have complete beginners who are kids. I have complete beginners who are, adults or in their 20s. I have, the well-seasoned horse equestrians and horseback riders. I have a couple of old ladies who are in their 70s that I teach too. So, it literally, we cover the entire spectrum. But it's in my clause that, I don't tolerate hate. I don't tolerate bigotry. My barn is a place where everyone is welcome. And if you can't facilitate that, then you're not welcome here. And that means listening to different people's perspectives. That means sharing stories and having more of that community type feeling at the barn. Like I said, the barn is a safe space, and that's something that was really, really important to me. I work really hard for it to be a safe space for myself, the people who work under me, and of course, like for my horses. Why would I not want to extend that to my clients?
And yeah, and that's the piece I wanted to ask about is just the sense of, you know, we're learning so much about ethical horse care, ethical horse training. This is becoming, thankfully, more of a thing.
Yes.
Right? Yay.
Yes.
Woo. And
seriously,
this sense of, okay, we're starting to treat our horses better.
like,
right.
Don't be an asshole is like
yeah, exactly.
the thing I'm always saying. I'm like, just don't be an asshole. Like it's not anyway. But yes, like for a long time, I would say probably the first at least 7 years of my like, no, actually way longer than that. But like you just felt like you were shouting into a void when you'd see people like trying to shove bits in the horses' mouths or like pop them to keep them going. And I'd always be like, doesn't that not feel good to you? Like they're telling you no and you're forcing it to happen anyway. And like, of course, like depending on what circles and people I'm talking to, I'm like, you realize if you did that to another person, that would be assault or, like coercion. And that's abusive. Why would you do that to the animal? Like it just never made sense to me. And now it's like these last couple years, I'd say probably around the last 4 or 5 years, there's really been a pretty big shift of people being like, oh, maybe we should really like start reading into this more and looking into these other ways and seeing how successful other people have been. Because I think that's a big thing was like all the traditional people are like, yeah, well, you can't really train that way or, like you can't show your horse like that. And it's like, you can though. Like you just have to hold yourself a lot more accountable is the problem.
Yeah. Totally. And what I've been seeing as well, because I've been really sitting with this of like, okay, what is it that stops people, And I find often it's extra labor for them, So they're like, well, I don't want to go to this next I don't want to change something that I have to actually work to kind of and get uncomfortable a little bit and have
exactly
like we talked about a hard conversation about with myself, with someone else, about it, right? And so there's
Yeah.
this kind of place that we get into. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's something like, and to tie it back into, you know, what we were talking about with, you know, having the ethical horsemanship and treating, you know, people of color, marginalized people with more kindness and compassion. And I think that's the biggest thing that's missing is like understanding that you have to do the emotional labor, you have to do the homework, you have to hold yourself accountable and like work towards having more empathy, because that to me is the biggest thing. Is like, you know, I think people who have more empathy are less inclined to want to do harm onto others. And you know, and so it's reconnecting to that part of yourself that might be lacking in empathy. And I think that's also something a lot of people don't want to admit, is that they, you know, like, and I could deep dive into this like big time, of how, you know, like that disconnect in empathy is a disconnect in community. And the reason we have that, especially on this side of the continent, is because of, you know, colonization, you know, the way that our, and I know you're in Canada, but Canada is like the more friendly version of the United States. They still have their issues. But yeah, it became like this whole, I'm going to do my own, I'm going to do me, I'm going to do what's best for myself and my family, not like, why don't we sit down and see how this could be good for everybody, you know? And so it became a culture of taking instead of a culture of receiving. And so I as a, like I said, a woman of color, as a reconnecting Indigenous woman, like I can't not see that.
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, it's this, you know, when you talk about that, it just am so, it takes me into this space of the absolute detriment of an individualistic culture where we've been taught that our needs are prioritized over others, and that I'm going to take care of my nuclear family, like you say, and then, you know, the rest of it, you guys
right, like screw
out.
Everybody else. And it's like, but we all live here. But,
Yeah.
you know, why would we not want to look out for everybody? And you know, and it's not like that everywhere. You know, where I used to live in New York, there was a huge sense of community and people really looked out for each other. And you know, and you had that. But it's like, not that you can change the whole world, but why not have that universally across the board, you know? And I feel like where I can make an impact and make that change is in the horse world. So yeah, that's why that's why I was like, something's got to change. It's got to give.
Yeah, thank you for doing this work, because I know it's probably not easy at all to be coming up against resistances and these places, right?
It is. It's tough. It's hard. It's exhausting, because 9 out of 10 times, like the mental, emotional labor falls on me. And I like, you know, I have a really great network. I have some really amazing people that I can, you know, talk to when I need to, and who are also open to listening. And that's something I think that's also important with my clients. Like, you know, like we'll talk about stuff like this and talk about different perspectives. And, you know, I don't ever try to force feed anything to anybody, but like, hey, can we sit down and talk about this or have a conversation about this? Or, you know, why that does affect us today, and like how, you know, how people treat me or other people of color in the horse industry. And even just like sharing stories about it and people being like, oh my God, like someone said that to you, that's kind of awful. And it's like, yeah, you know, it happens like, you know, very frequently. So, you know, it's something that we have to live with every day. And I feel like that doesn't really get paid attention to unless it gets brought up. And yeah, and so it's a lot of work. And I am also grateful that there are more and more people that are opening up to wanting to have that conversation. And you know, and if that's the case, like I am so willing to sit down and have those hard conversations with people. The one thing I will not do is get into like an argumentative conversation. I'm not here to try to prove anything to you. Like there's nothing to prove. That is what it is, you know? And so like I'm not going to waste my breath, my time, my energy on that. But, you know, if like you reached out to me, you want to have a conversation, I was like, yeah, let's do it, you know? And I've had, you know, other people reach out and they just want to talk and, you know, and just get a different perspective, right? Your perspective is different than mine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's important. It's a very important perspective to have, you know, because in an industry where, yeah, people of color are just like you say, there is a real lack of diversity, inclusion, equity. And so those voices are, you know, sparser, right? And also from what I've been starting to learn, it's like, and I can only imagine that a lot of people of color are very tired of having these conversations. You're tired.
We're very tired.
You know, it's like that's a lot of stretching and hard conversations and emotional labor to be doing to try to educate. So I mean, it's why I'm so appreciative, because I know like even something like this, it's something that you're giving, right? But I appreciate and receive like how much, yeah, that means to me and also to my listeners around like, you know, their understanding, their growth, their learning about,
right,
you know, how we all share this space together in a good way, you know, in a way that,
right, exactly,
you know, like feels good for all, right?
yeah. And that's the goal, you know. And I think as, you know, someone who's an ally also, you know, doing the homework and seeing how you can help alleviate some of that like mental and emotional exhaustion and burden, because a lot of times, and not that like, you know, obviously your experience is different than mine, but you know, still just like even the little things of holding people accountable, you know, like so many times there have been a lot of times where like I don't call people out on their crap because I'm like, I'm too tired to even think about having this conversation right now, so I'm just gonna walk away. And you know, like that's where I've also been in situations where a friend would say something and be like, that was kind of, you know, really insensitive, and say something, and it's like, oh, thank you know, in my head I'm just thinking like, thank you, because I really did not have the energy to say that, you know. And you just kind of look at people, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it does, it helps knowing that there are other people that are willing to put the work in, and that's a really big important thing.
Yeah. So we were talking a little beforehand about like hard conversations, and I think that many of us in the horse industry have opportunities for hard conversations often.
Yes,
I know I had several yesterday, and I sort of and I kind of was like, ooh, you know, and it's just this really interesting place that I've been working with of like, oh, that there was an opportunity for a conversation. And I kind of went and like eked around it.
Right, like this feels a little uncomfortable. I think maybe not today.
Maybe, you know, not wanting to ruffle feathers, not wanting to maybe cause certain repercussions or not, right? As a white woman, you know, my sense is my repercussions would be, you know, not really a huge deal, right? Like, whereas I think what I'm hearing more and more is it's like a bigger risk, right? There can be, right? And
much bigger risk.
Yeah, and real risk. Whereas for me, it's more, oh, it's uncomfy.
Right. Like I'd just rather not. Like sort of thing. And that is a really good point and a really big thing. And something that like I also talk to my friends about is that like you can choose to avoid that, and because it doesn't directly affect you, it's like, yeah, you might feel a little uncomfortable, but okay, whatever, like moving on. Whereas, you know, also like a big part of the emotional labor is knowing and understanding where a lot of these things come from, and that it comes from a much deeper place. And it's not just like, oh, someone saying something insensitive to you. It's like this whole, oh, here's yet another reminder of the fact that like you are seen not as equal. You know, it's like that constant reminder over and over and over again. And then you're just like, even if you do the work and you're like super secure in yourself and confident and comfortable, it's like when you're constantly hearing people say stuff like that, it's gonna bring you down, you know, and it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt. And it's almost like that discomfort and pain, it's not just what they're saying that day. It's like you have all of the history behind it too. Because in your mind, you're like, well, if this person understands our history here and like how my people have been treated for a long time, they would understand why this is hurtful. And that's where the empathy comes in, right?
Wow.
Because they can't be empathetic enough or relate to you enough to think, maybe I just shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And that's that disconnect. And that's kind of something that ties over into the horses. Like for people like that, where like their lack of empathy for people of color and horses is, I'm not gonna, like you said before, I'm not gonna say it's the same, but it's like it comes from this place where like they're always up here and they're always above you, you know, like for the horse, well, I bought you and I feed you, so I expect you to do what I want, you know. And then it's like like for people of color, they're like, it's almost like if you speak up against something that they say, they're like, how dare you question me, you know. That's almost how it comes off as, of a like you should be grateful, or I don't understand why you have to complain and like belittle you and all this other stuff. And you're like, oh, right, okay, you just don't care at all. You know. And it's pretty arrogant. And we can say all day long that, you know, like we're all people, or, you know, people will say like, I don't see color and this and that, but it's, you know, you say that, you dismiss what we go through all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, and even like for myself, like my experience is going to be different than like, you know, a Black equestrian's experience. And I can't speak on that for them, just as it would be for like an Asian American's experience. Like it's all different. Like it's all intersectional, but it all comes from the same place. And that's that superiority.
Wow. Yeah. I was really, one of the pieces in your post that I found very supportive was you talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, and you shared some very specific examples of how to center these values within a horse environment or within a riding environment.
Yeah.
And I really love that, like that sense of, okay, there's some things going on that are not working well. How do we start to make small steps to a space that is more accessible, inclusive, diverse?
Yeah. 100%. And that was something, and I thought it was like really important to include that in that piece that I wrote, because, you know, talking about the heavy stuff, like I said, we need to have those hard conversations, but we also need to come up with solutions too. Right? Like I don't want to just keep talking about it and have nothing happen. You know, I'm a very action-based person, so it just doesn't make sense to me to be like, like to be like, hey, you know, these are all the problems. This is what's wrong with the world. This is what's wrong in the horse industry. Like, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, so and those were just a couple of things that, like I said, I implement at my barn, and in my program, and also, you know, that I've heard in like other people doing as well. So I just made like a pretty short list of things, because they're really, I mean, there's so many things that we can do. And I think taking those small steps and even just doing those little things, like I said, in all of my like contracts, or, you know, lesson program contracts that I have people sign, I have a little blurb in there about inclusivity in my program. You know, no matter your race, your gender, your culture, whatever, like you are invited and welcome here, you know. And that's, I mean, how easy is that to write 3 sentences and include that in your contract, so that when people go to read your contract, they see that, and it either they feel disgusted by it, then they can leave, Or they see that and they're like, wow, like, it's such a small thing, but it means so much to the people that need to read it. And, and just like taking the time to educate yourself a little bit, big thing is like appropriate helmet fitting and, also advocating for that because most helmets are made specifically to fit like a European head, and people of different ethnicities and races have different head shapes. They have, they wear their hair differently. And another thing that I spoke about at the actual conference is, like cultural hair covers, right? Like all of this needs to be thought about. It's not just, oh, you put the helmet on your head. You have to take all of that into consideration if you're going to open your doors to everyone. And it's hard. Like a lot of helmet companies don't cater to, people of different ethnicities and backgrounds. But there are people like in the POC equestrian world who are working towards like putting together lists of helmets that are fitting well and also trying to reach out to specific helmet companies to see if they can actually design a helmet that's made for people of color instead of being like, well, this one works well enough, like yes. Especially since, traumatic brain injuries are right in the horse world. Like we have to protect our heads.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm hearing is that the more people speak up, so, the more people that reach out to a helmet company and say, hey, this is something that we need. This is important. I need this for my students. I see that in my world too, where it's like here on the island and the mainland, the horse spaces aren't great in a rainforest. There's been a way of keeping horses that, frankly, I think sucks, which is small pens, small stalls. And I tell people, hey, if you want it to change, ask for more ask for different. Start to make the change at that grassroots level where you're saying, I want different things included. How do we make that happen? I want the horse to be centered. How do we make that happen? Right. Yeah. So it's beautiful hearing these pieces of like, okay, these give us ways that we can support by just asking for that little bit more from whatever it is, a manufacturer, the people that we're working with, these sorts of things to actually create an environment that works for all. Right,
exactly. And it's, I mean, you would think that it would be kind of common sense at this point, right? It's 2023. Like, it's not like we're in the 1920s anymore. That's actually 100 years ago. Okay. Sorry. I just realized, I was like, wait a second. Okay. But yeah, like there's so many beautiful, amazing, different people out there. Why would we, subject ourselves to being in such a closed off, isolated group, like the way I see it is like variety is the spice of life. Like and granted, like I said, I grew up in New York. I grew up in Queens and Long Island, and like was in and out of Manhattan all the time. Like I was lucky enough to be in one of the most racially, culturally diverse places on the planet. And it was awesome. Like I kind of wish everybody got to grow up in the same kind of way because you appreciate and you respect all of these differences that, and in culture and how people dress and just like all of these things. Like there's so much to appreciate. There's so many beautiful things. There's so many beautiful outlooks on life that to say that we all have to be a certain kind of way is crap.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a big shift to move to South Carolina. Hey.
Oh God, yes. I still, not gonna lie, I feel like at some point I'm probably gonna move back to New York because I just like every time I go up to New York to visit my family and I come back down, I'm just like, oh God, here we go again. Okay. Like I just it's hard. It sucks. Like you very much so feel like an other down here. And it's funny because I feel like I say this all the time, but like when I first moved down here, I was young, you know, it was 10 years ago. I was younger. The only other place really down south that I had been to was like Miami. And then I think we went to like Virginia Beach for like a mini vacation. But, you know, it's super touristy little like beach areas. I've never been to the South. So when I moved down here, like all my family was like, Michelle, like the South is really racist. Why are you moving down there? You're brown. Like, why? I was like, it really can't be that bad. Like it's you know, there's no way it's gonna be that bad. And then I moved down and I was like, oh, it is that bad. Like I always told everyone, I was like, I feel like I got on a plane and like it was actually a time machine and I went back in time like 50, 60 years because it's just so backwards down here.
Yeah. Oh man. Come on.
Right.
Come on. Well,
Right.
I'm gonna go to the positive side of South Carolina because you also have this really cool thing that you do down there, which I am a little jelly of, which is you volunteer for the dissections and hang out in the bone room at, I think it's Equus-Soma. Is that how you say it?
Yes, the Osteology Center. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So it's like there's these two completely different worlds down here where I'm like, there are so many wonderful things about the equestrian community down here, and it really is growing and expanding, and people are wanting to learn so much, and I love it. And but yeah, so I met Pam and Diane a while ago. I don't know how many years ago at this point, but we officially started doing stuff together when I first kind of kickstarted my business and my program, and I wanted to do like immersive educational clinics, right? So I'm also like a really big nerd, and I think truly, yeah, exactly. But I feel like, you know, the education aspect, of course, you know, in my program, I want my students to have fun. I want them to feel safe and welcome, but like, I really want them to learn. I don't want it to be like, okay, make the horse trot now, you know, like we're going to understand the mechanical function of the entire horse and human, you know? And so I try to put these fun clinics together. And it was right before COVID, so that was also another shit show. But I started doing the clinics with Pam and Diane, and I would have a classroom day. So I'd take everybody over to the bone room and, you know, we would talk about like different pathologies, of course, ECVM, and just like get people to look and feel and touch and hold the bones, you know, because like I can talk about how, you know, if your horse is going around inverted, they're, you know, it's going to do damage to the processes and that, you know, develop kissing spine and, you know, issues in the lumbosacral junction and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, you can hear me say that. But then when people touch a spine that is riddled with kissing spine, and even to the point where beyond you can see where it's, you know, not just the processes, but you can see, you know, fusion or ossification in the actual like spine.
Yeah.
And so when people see that, they're just like, oh my God, you know, it's totally different thing. And I really, and of course, like the nerd in me just loves going there. And and like me, Pam and Diane, a lot of times we can just like be talking and talking and talking. And I love it. And I love throwing around ideas with them and collaborating with them. And so when they were talking about doing the dissections here, I was like, yes, sign me up. I was like, I will come and volunteer and do as much as you know, like you guys need me to do, because it's just, I mean, the amount that you learn from all of that, and like Sharon is amazing, you know, Pam and Diane are amazing, and my friend Kayla actually hosts them at her farm. So yeah, so like it's just, first of all these great women, and you know, and everyone is there to genuinely like learn and do as best as we can, you know, to help our horses. And the biggest thing I'll say, the biggest takeaway from all of it, and not that I've done a ton, but I've done 4 dissections now. And it's that like our modern horses are gonna have pathology. We talk about wild versus domestic, or feral versus domestic, right? Because a lot of our quote unquote wild horses are technically feral, but that a lot of the issues are that modern horses have are due to, breeding and riding. Their bodies evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to be these like fully functional nomadic grazing animals. And then we were like, well, let's, play with natural selection here and start breeding for certain character traits and dispositions and more suppleness and all this other stuff. And, we sucks to hear, but we are a lot of the cause of these issues. Like majority's issues are because of us, so it's not like we can eradicate them. What we have to do is maintain our horses as best as we can, and that means more ethical husbandry, really diving into, I'm not going to say proper, but better riding and mechanics and even groundwork and just basic handling so that you understand what you're doing to your horse when you do it. And that's the biggest thing that I want people to learn and take away from the dissections. It's not to be like, oh my God, like ECVM is going to kill all the horses and it's super detrimental. And granted, yes, like there are a lot of horses that suffer with it and are in excruciating pain, and we have to do what's best for them to maintain that. And sometimes the best decision is to put them to rest. But there's also horses that have it that are still functional.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work with the horse that you're handed that day. And that goes for horses with pathologies and horses without.
Yep.
So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent with that, but
no,
yeah.
I loved your tangent. It's grand. I saw one of your posts and I really resonated. It was the one that you said, you cannot supple bone.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, yes, let's talk about this, because honestly, this is one of my little like conversations that I need to have that are hard, is when I see what I've seen is trainers and other people like, yeah, we just need to take the tension out of the body and all will be well. No problem,
Oh God.
So yeah, I want your rant on this.
Yeah. Total side note though, your cat is really adorable. I keep looking at your cat.
So cute. Look at her little belly.
She's so cute. Sorry, I just had to say it because I kept looking at your cat and I was like, I just am feeling this urge. But anyway.
I get distracted by her constantly, so don't worry. She's got like the tiniest little tail that's all curly. So cute.
Oh,
I know.
That's so cute. But yeah, so I made that post and it's right. Like, so there's so many different things that are put on social media that I feel like, so I'm a very sarcastic person and I can be very dry sometimes, but sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, people, like, please stop putting out misinformation. And there's a lot of things that should just make sense to people and they don't. But there is that issue. And right, like, so I'm a classical dressage rider. And yeah, and so there's this whole like, oh, lateral flexion and suppleness and balance and blah, and which, yes, is ideal. I'm not going to say that it's not, but thinking that you can get a horse completely balanced left to right and have them move the exact same way is so ignorant. And flexing them to supple them, like you said, I mean, the amount of times I've seen riders and trainers like overflex horses, either hyperflex them, right, where they're going way beyond the vertical, or pull their head so far sideways that like now the horse can't even move properly, like they're basically hinged at like C6 and their whole neck is going one direction, their body's going another. And I'm like, that's not suppling anything. All you're doing is creating imbalance and dysregulation. And I think that something that like really made me reconsider a lot of things in the technical or traditional dressage world was like my own physical issues. Like I have a back injury, I have arthritis in my neck, like I have all these things going on. I've had a traumatic brain injury, so like sometimes my depth perception is off. I can't move like a person without all of these issues. Am I crippled? No, absolutely not. Like I'm still super athletic. I'm still really fit. I can do all these things, but like if you expect me to do the same thing in the same way as someone with none of these issues, I'm going to be shit out of luck. Like, you know,
Totally.
and so,
Yeah.
and then side note, you know, that's where that empathy comes in, is like, well, why, if I can't do that to my own body, why would I make it happen in a horse's body? The whole idea of correctness is garbage. And I know it, like it, I always feel like every time I talk about stuff like this, they're like, what kind of dressage trainer are you? Because they're so like strict and like, well, the horse's head has to be exactly on the vertical and you have to be doing like this and your leg yields have to look like this. And I'm like, no, like you have to ride the horse and the body that they have. And if the horse cannot do it, do not force them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I take a very slow, gradual approach to training and doing groundwork, in-hand work, whatever. You know, I implement a lot of positive reinforcement training, but I just pay attention to the horse, right? Like if they say, hey, I can flex, but right here is my limit. I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to go past that. Let's build you up here. And then if they offer more, then you go there. This whole making them do something or making them supple, I'm like, how is it actual suppleness if you're the one making it happen and the horse isn't finding it themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something like I teach my students too. And yeah, you know, because that's another thing, right? Like going off on a tangent again, that's fine.
Do
Most people learn to ride and work with horses by making the horse do something. They don't ever get to learn from the beginning how to ask and allow a horse to offer something. And those are two totally different things. And my one lesson gelding, I always say he's a physical hot mess, right? I'm pretty sure he has ECVM. He had EPM. He was in a terrible like pullback tying accident, like basically hung himself. Just poor guy, like has been through it. But he is a wonderful, wonderful like walk trot lesson horse. And you know, he's very sensitive. He's trained off of like your breath and your seat and your energy and lightness. And so, you know, if I always tell people, I'm like, he's happy to do what you ask him to do if you ask him the right way. If you don't, he's not going to give it to you. And so, but then there's sometimes too where like, you know, they'll be riding him and he'll just stop and be like, I don't know if I want to keep going today. And I'm like, he's done.
Yep.
Time to get off, you know, and like instilling that empathy and understanding and being like, you know, he's like the weather affects him, you know, like extreme changes in the weather affect him, the seasons affect him, and say today might not be his best day. Like, let's end it there, just spend extra time grooming him. And they're like, you know, and then they see it from a place of empathy instead of like, oh, just make him keep trotting or keep going. Like if he says no, respect the no. And that applies to, like I said, with training. Like if they say, hey, I cannot bend this way, I cannot do this, listen. And that was the whole point behind that post, is like if a horse is resisting you in doing something that you're asking, like some whatever physical activity, you know, even if the horse looks fine, there might be all these things going on underneath the skin that you are completely unaware of. And so in you trying to force the horse to do something, you're causing them pain. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people like flex horses and then the horses almost flip over.
Yeah.
Because it's pain. And then, you know, somebody says like, oh, well, they need to learn they can't do that to people. And it's like, have you ever, like, you know, if you've had that like really sharp nerve pinch or like tissue damage or something where you're like, oh, and it feels like you get electrocuted. I'm like, there's nothing to learn there. All they learn is that when the human does this, it makes my neck hurt. So now if we start to do that, I'm going to anticipate pain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you know, for you having seen the bones, seen like, yeah, what can happen? You know, my mare is 24 now, and I think more than likely she's got changes. She's got pathologies at this point, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
She's a domesticated horse. It's going to happen.
Right. It's normal.
It's normal for her, right? Unfortunately, but it is. How do we work with that? You know, it was just our 20th anniversary, or is kind of like in the moment. I can't remember the exact date, but like, you know,
that's
so I was
awesome.
Like, okay, we're going to I had a chiropractor out to work with her. And of course I do a lot of body work. I've been doing Celeste nerve release course. And it was so cool for me because she was having like you say about the suppleness. So we were having So we ride very basic dressage type stuff, but it's fun for us. And I know with Diva now, because when I first got her, I was very much the like, make it happen. You know, she wasn't comfortable going forward. I would make it happen. I look back and it's so cringy. And now I know when she doesn't offer forward, I'm like, okay, something else is going on. When she doesn't offer an ease of bend or flexion, and it's just flowing for her and floating, there's something else going on. And so she asked for this particular chiro. I was like, yep. And I did some nerve release along with it and some of my other work and cranial work. And lo and behold, the next time we went out to ride, it was like, I just asked really softly with my breath. And she's like, yes, like, I want to move. I want to go. I feel good. I feel good in my body. And I was like,
yes.
Yeah. You know, these pieces, when I hear, I guess, some trainers that are like, oh, this will do all the things. I'm like, I don't think so. I think we need other stuff to actually
100%
this horse to work with the bone, work with their joints, work with what's happening in their body in that moment, right? Yeah. And that, you know, that's kind of, I'm feeling like more and more where I want to come down and visit you all at the bone room.
Yes, come visit. That would be so awesome. And I legit everybody, I'm like, everybody that I know, I tell them, I'm like, if you can make it down here, please come down, you know, because like I said, it's one thing to talk about it and to see something, you know, even like on the internet or in a video, but it's different to hold it in your hands. Absolutely. And really feel and see the pathology up close and personal. And, you know, and it is like a multifaceted way that we have to approach our horses, not just like, you know, like, and having that understanding with working with them is super important. But so is, like you said, so is the body work, so is nutrition, so is hoof care. Like everything has to be taken into consideration. You know, they aren't beasts of burden anymore, so they shouldn't have to tolerate being in consistent pain. And there's actually, I don't know if you know her, but this woman, I love her. She's out in, I forget the name of the island, but it's another island off of Washington. So up in your neck of the, yes, Kathy.
Yes.
And I've actually, like, I've taken her courses, and I've, you know, like learned so much from her.
She's probably listening. So Kathy Sierra, this one's a shout out to you.
Yes. Always sending her random messages, but it's fine. But it was so, like, I just resonated with her work so much because of how much is like she talks about the intrinsic desire of a horse to want to be forward, to want to do upper level movements and be expressive. And like, you know, again, in my mind, when I first kind of set out on my training journey, I was like, isn't that what it should be? Like, isn't that what makes sense? Like, how is it we're going to say, you know, classical dressage and training is enhancing or showcasing the natural movement and beauty of the horse, but then you're forcing them to move in a way that they don't want to move? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, you know? So when I first saw, you know, like came across her, I want to say it was like back in 2016 or something. I don't know, something like that. I was just like, oh my God, yes. Like, because, you know, and she also talks about, you know, it's not just like, oh, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this groundwork and get our horses to have this natural desire again and to love moving through their bodies again. But, you know, understanding anatomy and functionality, like you still have to have that baseline of understanding of what the mechanics of the joints are and how the horse is supposed, like their body's supposed to work overall. And then through that, allow for freedom and expression and experimentation in their movement. And something someone asked me too was like, okay, but out of that, then how do you train? Because, like, you know, dressage riding is very structured. So they're like, how do you go from that to that, you know? And that's where I like, you know, connection to your horse, of course, but like I'll implement a lot of positive reinforcement training. So like if they do something or a certain movement or like a beautiful collected walk to canter transition, I reward it. And then I teach them a cue for that movement. And then I translate that movement to riding, via the verbal cue. And I teach them the physical cue to get the same thing under saddle. So that it's like, I'm not putting my horse in a frame or being like, oh, you have to collect and come up here. It's like, this and this movement, and I want you to do the movement in your own terms, in your own way.
Yeah.
With me just like on your back.
And be like cheerleading, going, that was so cool.
Yeah. And it is like, I do like, whenever they do something really cool or interesting or expressive, like I make it a big deal.
Totally.
You're like, oh my God, yes, 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 And it's funny, like sometimes I get training horses in and I start doing stuff like that. And they get kind of freaked out because they're like, why the hell is this lady yelling at me? Until they're like, oh wait, this is fun. Like, yes, this isn't angry yelling.
She's okay. She's okay.
Right.
I do that the other day, Raven. We have a big, huge tractor tire in the field that I filled in.
Oh, nice.
On this big pedestal. And my mare Raven loves it. Like, and she loves to incorporate it in her free play. But she's been doing this really cool movement where she like puts her front legs on it and then she pushes off her front legs and does like a turn on the haunch, like off.
Oh, nice.
And
yeah.
I'm like clicking her. That was amazing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the fun thing too is sometimes horses like that, like, and then once they realize it's a big deal, then they start trying more and trying harder and doing like experimenting in other ways. And so like, I like that's probably, especially with the groundwork, one of my favorite things to see is like how they're like, how they take that energy and go with it. And of course, like having that large variety of movement for them is really healthy, so it's just like, yes, you're playing, but you're also training and helping them, and like it's almost like physical therapy in a way too.
Building neural networks and maps and
yes,
cool stuff. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. We're coming to the end, which is very sad.
That was super short. Yeah.
I know. Where did the hour go? But I'm just so grateful for the depth and breadth of this conversation today with you. It's been
likewise. Yeah. And we kind of hit a lot of different things all in a very short period of time.
We totally did. And I'm sure that my listeners, lots of things that they may have learned along the way. And I'm just very grateful for your time and your generosity today. Yeah,
for sure. And likewise, like I really enjoyed this conversation and getting to talk with you and, express all of these different things. So I appreciate it very much. And I also want to say before I go that if there are people like who want to have conversations or, have questions about creating more inclusive spaces at their barns that, really want to take the next step, like that's something that I'd be open to doing and sharing with them. And I do, like I said, you brought it up, I have that post, but, if people want to dive deeper into it, like I'd be more than happy to do that. Cause like I said, that to me is just as important, creating that space for people is just as important as it is for our horses as well.
I love that we finished on how, allowing horses to intrinsically express themselves. And I think that's also, what we want for the people in this spaces too, to express their full selves,
Exactly. Like, nobody likes hiding parts of who they are just to make other people feel more comfortable. And again, like you said, that's another way to relate that to our horses and, like break all of these restrictions and traditions and really take a step in the right direction.
Yes, please. 2 thumbs up on that one. So can you share how people might be able to get in touch with you, Michele?
Yes. So I do have, I am going to revamp it, but I do have a website, instrideequestrian.com. I have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a TikTok account that kind of just has a bunch of random stuff on it, but it's fine. But they all have my contact information. You can either send an email, give me a call, send me a message via Messenger on both Facebook and Instagram. So there's lots of different ways and avenues to get a hold of me.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you for today.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
It was so nice to unofficially meet you.
absolutely. I'll be there. Don't you worry. You'll see me.
Yes. Yeah, shoot me a message when you're heading over.
I will. Absolutely. Oh, amazing. Well, thank you everyone out there for listening in. And I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks for another great podcast. And thanks, Michele. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening in today. I'm offering my kinetic communication online course in a self-study format starting on December 15th. And that includes extra support from me with 2 live webinars to join and ask questions. So if you've been wanting to add applied kinesiology to your wellness toolkit, and especially if you're interested in learning how to use this simple and powerful tool to connect with your own animals, this is a really great opportunity. I've taught this skill, which I also use daily in my practice with humans and animals, to hundreds of people over the last 17 years, and I'm hopeful that I get to share it with you. For more details, you can head to alexalinton.ca/kinetic-communication. And also for all the equine body workers out there, as well as human body workers, the level 1 of our equine cranial therapy certification, this is with myself and Elise Miki, is now open for applications for our January 2024 intake. So if you've been looking for a comprehensive osteopathically informed program that's also improved by the NambiCam, you can look no further. More details on this program are at equilibriatherapeutics.com/equine-craniosacral. Look forward to seeing you there.